So I am the problem. Fine. Watch me disappear on my terms.
Here are Q4 projections and the part where I fix what everyone else broke.
Who the hell underestimated her?
A peaceful Thanksgiving without drama.
Then enjoy your peace. We made our own.
We're in France, at Cassie's villa. You humiliated this family.
We're staying.
First flight home, or everything stops.
He can buy silence, not our spine. Then we choose us.
After all we've done, this performance?
It's not a performance. It's a boundary.
Tell your sister to come home.
We're home.
See me or step aside.
I'm Cassandra, 32 years old, and I always thought being the reliable daughter meant something. Thanksgiving was just 2 weeks away, and with my big promotion to executive VP, this was supposed to be the year they finally saw me. But then a text message from my own mother completely blindsided me. Just 6 words. We need space. Maybe you could skip this one. Space. After 20 years of putting them first, I was being told to just disappear. The feeling of being completely erased was gut-wrenching. But they had no idea I had just secretly closed on a $1.2 million villa in Europe. They thought I'd be alone. They were wrong. If you've ever felt like an option to people who should have made you a priority, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Because this story is just getting started. While my family was busy celebrating Melanie's small victories, I was quietly building an empire. At Nexus Technologies, I wasn't just an employee. I was a force. I started as a junior analyst, fresh out of college, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a desperate need to prove my worth to someone, anyone. And I climbed. Fast. I didn't play office politics. I didn't schmooze. I just worked. I worked harder, longer, and smarter than everyone else in the room. When a project was failing, they gave it to me. When a client was threatening to walk, they sent me in to close the deal. I became the person they called when things went south. Their fixer. It was a role I was familiar with. I remember the launch of our flagship software, Phoenix. 3 weeks before the global release, our lead developer quit, taking half his team with him. Panic set in. The CEO, a man who rarely left his corner office, stormed into the bullpen, his face pale. He looked around at the chaos, and his eyes landed on me. He didn't even know my name back then. He just pointed and said, "You, fix this." And I did. For the next 21 days, I practically lived in that office. I slept on a couch in the break room, survived on vending machine snacks, and coordinated with our teams across 3 different time zones. I rewrote the code. I managed expectations. I held it all together with sheer force of will. We launched on time. The software was a massive success, generating over $50 million in revenue in the first quarter alone. The next Monday, the CEO called me into his office. He finally learned my name. He offered me a promotion to senior project manager. That was the first big step. From there, it was a blur of late nights and early mornings. I led the European expansion. I spearheaded the acquisition of a smaller competitor. Every success was another rung on the ladder. Every bonus check, every stock option grant wasn't just money. It was validation. It was proof that my work mattered somewhere, even if it wasn't at home. My friends would call, trying to drag me out for drinks or a weekend trip. I'd almost always say no. I can't. I've got this huge deadline. Or, maybe next time, this project is in a critical phase. Slowly, the calls stopped coming as often. I sacrificed a lot of my personal life on the altar of my career. It was a trade-off I made consciously. My work was the one place where my contributions were measured and rewarded. It was the one place where I wasn't invisible. Last year, after 10 years of relentless grind, it all paid off. I was promoted to Executive Vice President of Product Development. The position came with a salary that finally broke the 7-figure mark, a substantial stock package, and a level of responsibility I had dreamed of. But here's the thing, my family never understood. They saw me as Cassie, who's good with computers. They thought I had a decent job that paid my bills. When I'd mention a success at work, my father would nod politely and say something like, "That's nice, honey," before turning the conversation back to Melanie's latest drama. They had absolutely no concept of the scale I was operating on. They still pictured me in a small cubicle, not in a corner office overlooking the Boston Harbor. They thought I was just doing okay. That ignorance, that was my secret weapon. For years, I had a dream. During a semester abroad in college, I fell in love with the French countryside, specifically the Dordogne region. It was a place of ancient stone farmhouses, rolling vineyards, and a pace of life that felt like a deep, calming breath. I promised myself that one day I would own a piece of it. It wasn't just a fantasy, it became my singular focus. Every time I felt overlooked at a family gathering, I'd add another $1,000 to a secret investment account. Every time a promotion of mine was ignored, I'd buy another block of company stock. My pain became my fuel. My invisibility became my advantage. I spent years researching, watching the market, and waiting for the perfect property. And then, in October, I found it. A 300-year-old stone farmhouse, lovingly restored, set on 3 acres with its own small working vineyard. It had thick walls, exposed wooden beams, and a massive stone fireplace. It had 5 bedrooms, a detached guest cottage, and a rustic kitchen that felt like the heart of a home. The listing price was 1.2 million euros. To my family, that kind of money was an impossible fantasy. To me, thanks to years of savvy investing and unacknowledged success, it was a transaction. I handled the entire process remotely through secure video calls with my French real estate agent and lawyers. I remember the final call, sitting in my Boston apartment late one night. The agent's face was beaming on my laptop screen. "Congratulations, Madame Miller," she said. "The property is yours." I authorized the wire transfer with a few clicks. It was done. Just like that, I owned a piece of my dream. I hadn't told a single soul. Not my parents, not my sister, not even my closest friends. I planned to surprise them with photos at Thanksgiving. I had this picture in my head of their shocked and happy faces, finally seeing the tangible proof of my success. The name of the property was already on the deed. It was simple. It was perfect. Villa Cassandra. My sanctuary. My escape. My secret. They thought I was just the quiet, reliable daughter who lived a small life. They had no idea I was about to become the queen of my own castle. The first sign that something was wrong came about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of a budget review. My phone buzzed. It was my mom. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I saw the call was from her landline, which was unusual. I excused myself and took the call in the hallway. Her voice was strange. It was overly cheerful, like she was trying too hard. "Hi, sweetie. Just calling to check in. How are things?" she chirped. I told her I was busy with work, but things were good. Then she asked the odd questions. "So, Thanksgiving is coming up. You don't have any big work trips planned or anything, do you? You'll be in town?" I assured her I would be. Then a brief pause. "And everything is okay financially, honey? Your apartment lease isn't coming up for renewal or anything complicated like that?" The question was so out of left field. My parents hadn't asked about my finances since I was in college. In their minds, I was the stable one, the one they never had to worry about. "Everything's fine, Mom," I said slowly. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason. Just a mother worrying," she said, laughing a little too loudly. The conversation ended a minute later, but it left a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. It felt like I was being scouted, like she was checking my position on a map before planning an attack. I shook it off as my mother just being her usual, slightly neurotic self. But a few days later, my dad called. My dad never just calls to chat. He calls when he needs something or wants to give unsolicited advice. This time, it was a bizarre interrogation disguised as small talk. He asked about my job, not about my projects, but about my company's stability. Everything's solid at Nexus, right? No restructuring or layoffs on the horizon, he probed. Again, I was confused. No, Dad. In fact, things have never been better. We just had a record-breaking quarter. Good, good, he mumbled, sounding almost disappointed. The call ended as abruptly as it began. A knot of anxiety started to form inside me. It felt like they were checking for weaknesses, ensuring I was still the capable daughter, still the one who wouldn't need them before they did. Something. I just didn't know what. The answer arrived the following Tuesday. It arrived in the form of a text message, right as I was about to present the Q4 projections to the entire executive board. My phone chimed with my mother's custom tone. I smiled, expecting a last-minute question about what side dish I was bringing for Thanksgiving. I glanced down, and the air left my lungs. The words on the screen seemed to blur together, surreal and nonsensical at first. I had to read them 3 times for them to sink in. Hi, sweetie. Dad and I have been talking, and we want a peaceful Thanksgiving with just Melanie's family this year. Maybe you could skip this one. We need space. You understand, right? Love you. I stared at the screen. My hand started to tremble. The presentation, the boardroom, the entire world outside of those 33 words just faded away. Every syllable felt like a carefully chosen weapon. Peaceful. The implication was clear. My presence brought conflict. My presence was a disruption to their peace. Just Melanie's family, a clean, brutal line drawn in the sand. On one side, the essential family, the real family. On the other side, me. Optional, expendable. We need space. Space from what? From your daughter, who has done nothing but show up for you her entire life? The one who helped pay your mortgage for 3 months when Dad's business partner screwed him over? The one who researched therapists for your grandson when he was struggling in school? That daughter? And the final twist of the knife. You understand, right? It wasn't a question. It was an assumption. An order disguised as a plea. It was the culmination of 32 years of being taken for granted, all packaged in a casual, friendly text message. It was the most profound rejection I had ever experienced, and it was delivered with the same emotional weight as asking me to pick up milk on the way home. A wave of hot, white anger washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone against the wall. I wanted to type back a novel of rage, listing every single injustice, every forgotten birthday, every overlooked achievement. I wanted to ask if my financial support should also skip this one. But then, something else took over. A strange, chilling calm. The anger was still there, but it was like a furnace deep inside me, forging something new. It was forging resolve. This wasn't just another slight. This wasn't another moment of being sidelined. This was a declaration. They had officially, in writing, declared that I was not part of their core family unit. And in that moment, I realized they had just given me the greatest gift of my life. They had permitted men to stop trying. They had severed the final thread of obligation that had kept me tied to their table. At this point, I really don't have the words to describe this feeling, the feeling of being so cruelly discarded by your own family. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now, help me out and comment one word that describes their actions. Because what happened next? Well, that outrage became cold, hard fuel. The story could have ended there. I could have spent Thanksgiving alone, feeling sorry for myself. But their betrayal lit a fire in me. I made my plans, I bought the tickets, and I brought my real family together. The first evening at Villa Cassandra was magical. All of us, my Aunt Eleanor, my cousins Jordan and Sophia, my Uncle David and his family, gathered in the great room. A fire crackled in the enormous stone hearth. The air was filled with laughter and the easy chatter of people who genuinely loved and respected each other. For the first time in years, I felt like I was home. We were sharing stories and catching up when my cousin Madison suddenly gasped, her eyes glued to her phone. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You guys have to see what Aunt Linda just posted on Facebook." A hush fell over the room. Everyone looked at me. My Uncle David took the phone from his daughter and read the post aloud, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He read, "So excited for a truly relaxing and intimate Thanksgiving tomorrow. Sometimes less is more. Can't wait to spend some quality time with just my sweet daughter Melanie's family and my beautiful grandbabies." Family first, blessed. The room erupted. "Is she for real?" Sophia exclaimed, her face a mask of disbelief. "She just publicly announced to the entire world that you don't count." "The family first hashtag is what gets me," Jordan added, shaking his head. "The level of hypocrisy is just breathtaking." My Aunt Eleanor, my rock, came to my side and put a hand on my shoulder. She looked me straight in the eye. "She's creating a narrative, Cassandra," she said, her voice soft but firm. "A story where she is the devoted mother enjoying a quiet holiday, and your absence is a footnote. She's trying to control the story." I felt that familiar hot sting of anger behind my eyes. The public dismissal, the saccharine post designed to erase me while making her look like a perfect mother. It was a classic move. But as I looked around that room, I didn't see pity on anyone's faces. I saw fury. On my behalf. I saw a circle of people who had crossed an ocean on 2 weeks' notice to stand with me. I saw my true tribe. And in that instant, the anger didn't consume me. It focused me. I took a deep breath, the smell of the wood fire calming my nerves. I picked up my glass of wine and held it high. "Well then," I said, my voice steady and clear, cutting through the murmurs, "let's give them something to compare it to tomorrow." A cheer went up around the room. Glasses clinked. It was more than a toast. It was a promise. That Facebook post, intended to isolate and diminish me, had just backfired spectacularly. It had become a rallying cry. It had united us. It had turned our quiet gathering into a mission, and we were all in. Back in my office, after reading that text from my mom, the world seemed to slow down. The murmur of the boardroom outside my glass door sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. The initial wave of fiery rage had passed, and what was left was something far more potent. It was a cold, hard clarity. It was the feeling of 1,000 small cuts and 1,000,000 tiny paper-thin slices suddenly coalescing into one deep, clean wound. And with that wound came a profound realization, an epiphany. They will never change. It wasn't a sad thought. It wasn't a desperate plea. It was a simple statement of fact, as undeniable as gravity. They would always see Melanie as the one who needed them and me as the one who didn't. They would always celebrate her struggles and ignore my triumphs. No matter what I achieved, no matter how much I gave, I would always be the afterthought, the backup plan, the daughter they could afford to lose. And in that cold, quiet office, I finally mourned the family I wished I had. I mourned for the parents who would have been proud of my promotion, who would have marveled at my secret villa, who would have wanted me at their table not out of obligation, but out of genuine love. I let that grief wash over me for a full minute, and then I let it go. The pain was still there, but it no longer had power over me. It transformed. It became fuel. It became a focus. A new thought pushed through the silence in my mind, clear and strong. Enough. This ends now. Not with a fight. Not with tears, but with a choice. My choice. This would be the very last time they got to decide my worth. I picked up my phone, my hand perfectly steady now. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. My first instinct was to unleash hell. I drafted a dozen scathing replies in my head. After everything I've done for this family, this is the thanks I get? Should I also cancel the monthly payment that covers Emma's private tutoring, or is it just my physical presence that's unwelcome? Message received. I finally understand I'll never be as important as Melanie. My fingers flew, then paused. I read the drafts, and they felt weak. They were emotional. They were reactions. They were exactly what my mother would expect. A dramatic response from her overly sensitive daughter that she could then dismiss. They were playing checkers, and I was about to start playing chess. I deleted them all. Every last bitter word. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and thought about the advice my therapist, Dr. Warner, had given me just a week before. You can't control their actions, Cassandra, she had said. You can only control your response. My response. That was my power. I typed a single word, a word that offered no resistance for them to push against, no guilt for them to manipulate, no emotion for them to invalidate, just acceptance, and the beginning of my liberation. I typed, enjoy, and I hit send. The moment my thumb lifted from the screen, I felt a physical shift inside me. The constant, aching need for their approval began to dissolve, replaced by a surge of adrenaline, of possibility. The rejection that was meant to put me in my place had just set me free. I walked back into the boardroom, apologized for the delay, and delivered the most confident, compelling presentation of my career. I was on fire. For the first time, I wasn't performing for some phantom approval from my parents. I was performing for myself. After the meeting, my CEO pulled me aside, ecstatic. Cassandra, that was brilliant, he said. Whatever you've got going on, keep it up. Oh, you have no idea, I thought to myself. That evening, I didn't go home and wallow. I went home and got to work. I poured myself a glass of expensive scotch, the kind my father would deem a waste of money, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank document. I typed a title at the top of the page, Operation Thanksgiving Liberation. It sounded dramatic, but that's exactly what it felt like. A liberation. First, I created a spreadsheet. Column A, Guest List. I didn't start with my parents or Melanie. I started with the people who saw me, the people whose love wasn't conditional. My mother's sister, Aunt Eleanor, was the first name on the list. She was a psychology professor who had seen through the family dynamics for years. She was my advocate, my confidant. Next, my cousins, Jordan and Sophia. We grew up together, and our bond was forged in genuine affection, not forced family ties. My father's brother, Uncle David, and his wife, Aunt Patricia, and their two college-aged daughters, Uncle Michael and his husband, James. The list grew, and with each name I added, my conviction solidified. I wasn't just planning an alternative holiday. I was assembling my real family. Then came the logistics. Column B, Location. This was the easy part. Villa Cassandra, Dordogne, France. My secret weapon. Column C, Action Items. This was where my skills as a project manager kicked in. I broke down the next 2 weeks into a series of precise, executable tasks. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a whirlwind of planning. Book my own flight, Boston to Paris, arriving Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Contact French property manager Hélène to arrange for deep cleaning and stocking the villa. Arrange for a 15-passenger van rental from Charles de Gaulle Airport. Research local markets in St. Cyprian for fresh turkey and produce. Coordinate with guests regarding flight arrivals. The plan was audacious. It was complicated. It was borderline insane to pull off in just 2 weeks. And I had never felt more alive. The next morning, the calls began. I started with Aunt Eleanor. I took a deep breath and told her the whole story, starting with my mom's text. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, she exploded. "She did what?" Eleanor exclaimed, her voice a mixture of shock and fury. "Oh, Cassandra, I am so sorry. That is beyond cruel." "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how true the words felt. "I'm not sorry anymore, because I've decided to do something different this year. And I'm hoping you'll be a part of it." I told her about the villa. I described the stone walls, the rolling vineyards, and the massive fireplace. I could hear her smiling through the phone. "I'm hosting my own Thanksgiving there," I finished, "and I would be honored if you would come." Her response was immediate, her voice thick with emotion. "My darling girl," she said, "it would be my absolute honor. And Cassandra, I am so incredibly proud of you right now." One down. That first yes was like a shot of pure courage. It gave me the momentum to continue. I called my cousins next. Sophia answered, and I put her on speakerphone with Jordan. When I told them the plan, Sophia just laughed. "Are you kidding me? A Thanksgiving in a French villa instead of listening to Aunt Linda's passive-aggressive comments about my pie crust? Sign me up! I'm booking my flight right now." Jordan was more measured. "Cassie, this is... Wow, what about your parents? Do they know about this?" "They've opted for a peaceful holiday with just Melanie's family," I explained, putting the word peaceful in audible air quotes. There was a pause. Then Jordan said, his voice firm with support, "This has been a long time coming, Cass. We're in, 100%. The dominoes began to fall, one by one. Uncle David and Aunt Patricia were thrilled at the idea of an international adventure. Their daughters were ecstatic. Even Uncle Michael and James, who usually spent holidays with James's family, rearranged their plans to join us. With every RSVP that came in, I felt a piece of me that had been chipped away for years begin to heal. These people valued me enough to drop everything, to book expensive last-minute international flights, to embrace a crazy, spontaneous plan, all because I had asked them to. Their enthusiasm wasn't just support. It was a mirror, reflecting a version of myself that my parents had never allowed me to see. A woman who was loved, respected, and worthy of celebration. I worked like a machine, a quiet, efficient engine of liberation. I coordinated with Hélène in France, arranging for extra beds and linens. I researched French Thanksgiving recipes, planning a menu that would blend American tradition with local delicacies. I set up a group chat for the French Thanksgiving crew to coordinate travel. All of it was done in secret. My parents and I had our usual brief phone call that Sunday. My mom didn't mention the text. Neither did I. She asked what I was up to. "Oh, just work," I said vaguely, busy getting ready for the holidays. She had no idea that the holidays I was preparing for were not hers. She had no idea that as we spoke, an entire branch of her family was booking flights to another continent to defy her. She had pushed me out. She just didn't realize she had pushed me into building a kingdom of my own. Thanksgiving morning at Villa Cassandra was unlike any I had ever known. It dawned crisp and clear, the French sun painting the vineyards in shades of gold. I woke early, not from stress, but from excitement. The house slowly came to life around me, filled not with tension and obligation, but with the comfortable, easy intimacy of people who genuinely wanted to be there. We worked together in the kitchen, a chaotic but joyful ballet of chopping, stirring, and basting. Sophia's famous sweet potato casserole sat next to Jordan's garlic mashed potatoes. We laughed about past Thanksgiving disasters at my parents' house: the dry turkey, my mother's rigid kitchen rules, my father's endless monologues about his golf game. There was no walking on eggshells here. There was only collaboration and joy. The day unfolded in a beautiful, relaxed rhythm. The kids decorated the long harvest table with hand-drawn place cards. My uncles built a roaring fire in the great stone fireplace. The aroma of roasting turkey, sage, and thyme filled the air. It was perfect. It was everything a family holiday should be. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as the final dishes were being prepared, the first tremor of our old reality intruded on our new one. Multiple phones around the villa chimed almost simultaneously. My cousin Leah was the first to look. "Uh-oh," she said. "It's a group text from Aunt Linda." A collective groan went through the room. Uncle David read it aloud. "Hi, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're expecting Melanie and her family around 5 for dinner, but she's not answering her phone. Getting a little worried. Have any of you heard from her?" The message was a masterclass in passive aggression. It was a public performance of a concerned mother, designed to make Melanie look flaky and irresponsible, and simultaneously, to remind everyone of their central role in the family. We all looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. We would not respond. We would not engage. Today was ours. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, honeyed glow over the villa, we all gathered at the long harvest table. It was a scene from a magazine. Candles flickered, wine glasses sparkled, and 16 smiling faces were illuminated by the firelight. I stood at the head of the table, a lump forming in my throat. I raised my glass. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice thick with emotion. A few weeks ago, I never could have imagined this, but now, I can't imagine anything else. You've helped me create something truly special. To family, the one we build for ourselves. To Cassandra, Aunt Eleanor added, her eyes shining with pride. As we sat down to eat, the conversation was easy and flowed like the good French wine we were drinking. It was cathartic, this gentle, honest acknowledgement of the dynamics we had all endured for years. Then, right as we were about to serve dessert, it happened. A phone, sitting on the sideboard, began to ring. It was Melanie's. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me. My sister's eyes met mine across the table, filled with uncertainty. I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. It was time. This moment had to happen. Melanie took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and pressed the speaker button. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. My mother's voice filled the room, frantic and sharp. "Melanie, finally! Where are you? We've been waiting for hours. Your father is beside himself with worry." "We're fine, Mom," Melanie replied calmly. "We're having Thanksgiving dinner." A confused pause. "What do you mean you're having dinner? You're supposed to be having Thanksgiving with us." "Where are you?" Melanie looked at me again. I gave her another nod of encouragement. She took a final deep breath. "We're in France, Mom. At Cassie's villa." The silence that followed was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was a silence so heavy, so absolute, you could feel the weight of it. It was the sound of a world tilting on its axis. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was a whisper, a thread of ice. "I don't understand. Cassandra is in Boston." That was my cue. I leaned forward, my voice clear and even, carrying across the room to the phone. "No, Mom, I'm not. I'm in France, in my new home, with the whole family." "The whole family?" she repeated, her voice faint, the words barely forming. "Everyone except you and Dad," I confirmed, letting the words hang in the air. "Aunt Eleanor, Uncle David and his family, Uncle Michael and James, Jordan, Sophia, we're all here. Another long, agonizing silence. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to process an unthinkable reality, a reality where she was not the center of the universe. But we told you we wanted a peaceful Thanksgiving, she finally stammered, her voice a pathetic mixture of confusion and accusation. I leaned back in my chair, looking around at the beautiful, happy faces of the family I had assembled. I looked at the crackling fire, the remnants of a magnificent feast, the evidence of a day filled with love and laughter. I smiled, a real, genuine smile. Yes, you did, I replied, my voice smooth as silk. And that's exactly what we're having. The line went dead. She had hung up. For a moment, the room was still. Then, someone started to chuckle. Soon, we were all laughing. Not a mean laugh, but a laugh of sheer, unadulterated release. The tension that had held our family captive for decades had finally snapped. But the night wasn't over. Not yet. A minute later, Melanie's phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification. Voicemail from Dad. The laughter died down instantly. Tom, Melanie's husband, put a hand on her shoulder. I think you should listen, he said softly. Melanie's face was pale, but she nodded and once again pressed the speaker button. My father's voice boomed into the silent room. There was no confusion in his tone. Only pure, undiluted rage. It was a voice I knew well, the voice he used when he was losing control. Melanie, the voice snarled, and the venom in it made me flinch. I don't know what kind of sick game you and your sister are playing, but it ends. Now. Your mother is in tears. You have humiliated this family. I promised I would help you with the down payment on that house, didn't I? I promised I would cover Lily's private school tuition. You listened to me very carefully. If you and your husband are not on the first flight home tomorrow morning, you can forget about all of it. Every last cent. I will not fund the lifestyle of an ungrateful, disloyal daughter who would publicly embarrass her own parents like this. You have a choice to make. Beep. The voicemail ended. The warmth from the fireplace seemed to vanish. The beautiful, joyful room suddenly felt cold, sterile. Everyone was staring at Melanie, whose face had crumpled. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her husband, Tom. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about her. Her life. Her children's future. My father, in one masterful, cruel stroke, had found her weakest point and driven a knife into it. He was holding her family's security hostage. I felt a surge of guilt. I had brought her into this. I had put her in this impossible position. But then, Tom did something I never expected. He didn't hesitate. He didn't waver. He reached out, wiped the tears from Melanie's face, and looked from her to me. His voice was quiet, but it resonated with an iron certainty that filled the entire room. We're staying, he said. We're staying for the rest of the weekend, as planned. Melanie stared at him, her eyes wide. Then, a transformation happened. The fear in her eyes was replaced by something I had never seen there before. A spark of defiance, a flicker of my own fire. She straightened her back and looked at me. And she nodded. A single, firm nod. In that moment, the axis of our family didn't just tilt. It shattered. My father had tried to break us apart, but instead, he had just forged an alliance he never saw coming. After my father's voicemail bomb, the festive atmosphere of our dinner evaporated. The shockwave of his threat silenced the room. But it also did something else. It solidified our unity. The rest of the evening was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet. We cleaned up the kitchen together, a silent, supportive team. Small gestures replaced words. A comforting hand on Melanie's shoulder, a freshly brewed cup of coffee passed to Tom. We were no longer just a group of relatives having a holiday. We were a coalition. That night, I barely slept. But it wasn't from anxiety. It was from a strange, buzzing energy. The game had changed. The lines had been redrawn. And I knew the real storm was coming in the morning. I was right. I woke up to a battlefield. My phone screen was a sea of red notifications. 15 missed calls from Dad, 10 from Mom, and a flood of text messages, each one more frantic than the last. They ranged from feigned concern to outright accusation. Cassandra, call me immediately. This isn't funny. Your mother is having a panic attack. I hope you're happy. What have you done to your sister? Is she okay? Similar messages had bombarded everyone else's phones. My parents had spent the night waging a digital siege, trying to find a crack in our defenses. I silenced my phone and went downstairs. The house was quiet. One by one, others appeared, their faces tired but resolute. We drank coffee in a companionable silence, the unspoken understanding hanging in the air. Today was the day of the reckoning. Around mid-morning, as I was sitting in a sunbeam in the living room, trying to read a book, Melanie approached me, my phone in her hand. It was ringing. Again. It's been nonstop, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Maybe we should just get it over with. She was right. Hiding wouldn't solve anything. I took a deep breath, a sense of calm settling over me. I was ready. I nodded, took the phone, and walked into the small study off the main hall, closing the heavy oak door behind me. I let it ring one more time, then answered. My mother's voice was the first thing I heard. Not shouting. Worse, it was a high, thin wail of victimhood. Cassandra? Finally! We have been trying to reach you all night. We've been worried sick. I know, Mom, I said, my voice even. I needed some space. The irony of throwing her own words back at her was not lost on me, and I could hear her sharp intake of breath. This has to stop, she continued, her voice gaining strength, shifting from wounded bird to accuser. Whatever this performance is, you have to tell Melanie to come home. Your father and I have been completely blindsided. Do you have any idea how hurtful this is? To find out our entire family is together. Without us? The old, familiar guilt reflex kicked in, a lifetime of conditioning to put her feelings first. But this time, another voice pushed back. Dr. Warner's voice. Your feelings are just as valid as theirs. And do you have any idea how hurtful it was to be told not to come to Thanksgiving? I countered, my voice quiet but unyielding. To be uninvited from my own family? That is not what we meant, she insisted, her voice rising. Then what did you mean, Mom? Skip this one, we need space. Those were your exact words. We just wanted a quiet holiday for once. You know how stressful the big gatherings can be for me, she cried. They're only stressful because you make them that way, I replied, the truth just flowing out of me now, unstoppable. And they're only big because you invite all of Dad's business associates. But somehow, you couldn't find room for me at the main table last year. Her gasp was audible. She remembered. Of course she did. That's not fair, she protested weakly. No, I agreed. None of this has been fair. For years, I've watched you and Dad prioritize Melanie, make excuses for her, celebrate her smallest achievements while barely acknowledging mine. I've taken the leftovers of your time, your attention, and our respect, and I convinced myself it was enough. Because that's what the good daughter does, right? She doesn't complain. She doesn't make waves. She just keeps showing up, hoping that one day, she'll finally be seen. The words poured out, a torrent of unspoken truth that had been dammed up for decades. I wasn't shouting. I was just stating facts. When I finished, the line was so quiet I thought she might have hung up. Mom? I'm here, she finally whispered, her voice small and shaky. I, I just, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. Just listen. But before she could respond, I heard a shuffling sound, and my father's voice, cold and hard as steel, came on the line. Cassandra, this is ridiculous. Put Melanie on the phone. We need to speak with her. Of course. Even now, after everything I had just said, their focus snapped right back to Melanie. I was just the obstacle, the gatekeeper. A renewed wave of determination washed through me, straightening my spine. She's not available right now, I said calmly. But I am. I'm right here, trying to have an honest conversation with you both about the incredibly painful dynamics in our family. This is not the time for your therapy speak, he sneered. Then when is the time, Dad? I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. Because for 32 years, it has never been the right time to talk about how you two have made me feel completely and utterly invisible. That is the most absurd thing I have ever heard. We have always supported you. Have you? I challenged. When was the last time you asked me about my work? Not just if I was working, but what I was working on. What are my ambitions? When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements without immediately changing the subject to Melanie's latest crisis? His silence was my answer. It was a gaping, empty void, filled with all the conversations we never had. I don't need you to answer right now, I continued, my voice softening slightly. I just need you to think about it. Really, truly think about it. As if on cue, the study door opened silently and Melanie slipped in. She had Tom with her. She looked at me, her eyes asking a question. I nodded and pressed the speaker button, placing the phone on the heavy wooden desk. Mom? Dad? It's Melanie, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'm here with Cassie. My mother's voice instantly changed, brightening with relief and affection. Melanie. Oh, thank goodness. Are you all right, sweetheart? Your father's threat. He didn't mean it, he was just upset. When are you coming home? Melanie looked at me, then at Tom, who gave her a supportive squeeze on the shoulder. She looked back at the phone. We're staying through the weekend, Mom. As planned, she said. And you need to listen to what Cassie is saying. She's right. What do you mean, she's right? My father's defensive tone returned instantly. About how you treat her, Melanie clarified, her voice gaining confidence. Compared to how you treat me, I've seen it my whole life. I just never said anything because... She hesitated, and the next words were the bravest I had ever heard her speak. Because it benefited me, I guess. And that wasn't fair to her. The admission hung in the air, a stunning, world-altering confession. The silence that followed was profound. I reached across the desk and squeezed her hand, a wave of gratitude washing over me so powerful it almost brought me to tears. I don't understand what's happening, my mother finally said, her voice trembling, the foundation of her world completely shattered. We've always just tried to be good parents. We love you both so much. I know you do, I acknowledged, and I meant it. But love without respect isn't enough. Love without acknowledgement isn't enough. And that's what I've been missing. Your respect for my choices. Your acknowledgement of my worth, outside of what I can do for this family. So what do you want from us, Cassandra? My father asked, his usual booming confidence completely gone, replaced by a tone of genuine, desperate confusion. What is it you want? I looked at Melanie, my new, unexpected ally. I thought of the villa, of the family gathered in the other room, of the new life I was building for myself. I want you to see me, I answered simply. Not as your reliable appliance, not as Melanie's successful but emotionally distant sister. Not as the one who will always be there, no matter how you treat her. Just me, Cassandra, your daughter. Another long pause stretched across the continents. It was my mother who spoke first, her voice small, but for the first time it sounded steady. It sounded real. "We can try," she said. "I'm not sure we know how, but we can try." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't a full admission of guilt, but it was a start. It was more than I had ever gotten before. It was a crack in the dam. "That's all I'm asking," I said softly. And as I ended the call, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The power had shifted. For good. After that monumental phone call, Melanie and I just sat there in the quiet study for a long moment. The unspoken weight of 30 years finally lifted. When we walked out and rejoined the others, the atmosphere in the villa had changed. The tension was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace and relief. It was as if a storm had finally passed, leaving clean air in its wake. But I knew the storm wasn't truly over. My parents' promise to try was fragile. Decades of ingrained behavior don't just vanish overnight. I knew the attempts to regain control, the guilt trips, the emotional manipulation. They would come, and I had to be ready. The first attempt came that very evening, a text from my mother to me, not a group text, just to me. "Cassandra, I've been thinking about what you said. You're right. We haven't been fair. Your father and I are heartbroken. I can't sleep knowing how much we've hurt you. Can we please just talk? Just the three of us. When you get back?" It was a textbook move. The apology, immediately followed by the guilt-inducing image of her being heartbroken, and the request to isolate me, to pull me away from my support system for a private conversation where they could reassert their control. The old me would have caved instantly. The old me would have felt a pang of guilt and replied, "Of course, Mom." But the old me was gone, burned away in the fire of the last 48 hours. I took a screenshot of the text and sent it to my therapist with the caption, "The games begin." Then I typed my reply to my mother. It was polite, but it was a brick wall. "I appreciate that, Mom. Right now, I'm going to focus on enjoying the rest of the weekend with our family here. We can talk when I'm back in the States and have had time to process." I didn't offer a specific time. I didn't promise anything. I took back control of the timeline. The next attempt came from my father the following day. It was a voicemail. His tone was no longer angry. It was weary, paternal, and dangerously reasonable. "Cassie," he began, "your mother and we messed up. Badly. I was angry yesterday, and I said things to your sister that I deeply regret. Look, I've already called my financial advisor. I'm going to restructure things. Make it right. Make it even. Just tell us what we need to do to fix this." It was the ultimate lure. Money. The very thing they had always used as a tool of control, they were now offering as a peace treaty. He was trying to buy his way back into my good graces, to turn this into a transaction so we wouldn't have to deal with the messy emotional fallout. It was tempting. A part of me, the part that had been starved for his approval for so long, wanted to accept. But I knew it was a trap. It was a way to avoid the real work, the real change. I didn't reply to the voicemail. For the first time in my life, I refused to play their game. I refused to let them set the terms of my forgiveness. For the first time, I didn't back down. I chose myself over their comfort. This was a massive turning point. If you support this powerful decision, drop a flexed bicep emoji in the comments to send her some strength on this journey. That quiet act of defiance, of not responding, was my first true declaration of independence, and it felt incredible. The rest of the weekend at the villa was like living in a different reality. A better one. With the drama from my parents put on hold, we were free to simply be together. We explored the cobblestone streets of the nearby village, sampling local cheeses and wines. We took long walks through the vineyards, the crisp November air feeling clean and new. We spent the evenings gathered around the fireplace, playing cards, sharing stories, and laughing until our sides hurt. One afternoon, while Melanie and I were doing dishes together, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen since we were children. "I'm so sorry, Cassie," she said quietly, "for everything, for not seeing it, for not standing up for you." "It wasn't your fault," I told her, and I meant it. "They created the dynamic. We just played the parts we were given." "Still," she said, scrubbing a plate with unnecessary vigor, "I want things to be different between us. I'm tired of the old story." "Me too," I said, bumping her shoulder with mine. And just like that, a bridge was built over a chasm that had separated us for years. That evening, I found my Aunt Eleanor sitting alone on the terrace, looking out at the moonlit vineyard. I sat down beside her, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "You did it, you know," she said, not looking at me. "You changed the entire structure of this family in one weekend." "I didn't do it alone," I replied. "You were right there beside me. Everyone was." "We just followed your lead," she said, finally turning to face me, her eyes wise and kind. "You showed us it was possible to draw a line. You reminded us that family shouldn't be an obligation you endure. It should be a sanctuary you choose." We sat in a comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the distant hoot of an owl. "What happens now?" I asked the question that had been hovering in the back of my mind. "Now," she said, "you build your new world. And you decide who gets a visa." Her words resonated deep within me. This wasn't just about surviving my family. It was about creating a new one, a chosen family. The people gathered inside that warm, glowing farmhouse. They were the charter members. They were the ones who had shown up. No questions asked. My cousin Sophia had already started sketching ideas for a small expansion on the guest cottage. My Uncle James, who had promised to help me prune the vineyard next spring. Tom, who had stood by his wife, and, by extension by me, when it would have been so much easier to retreat. These were my people. This was my sanctuary. This was the family I was choosing. And as for my parents, their visa application was officially under review. A year has passed. I'm standing on the stone terrace of Villa Cassandra, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the sun set over my vineyard. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and wood smoke. Inside, the house is alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Preparations are underway for our second annual French Thanksgiving. This year, the guest list is even longer, filled not only with my chosen family but with close friends who have become part of this new tradition. My life is peaceful. It's a word I never truly understood until now. I left my high-stress job at Nexus 6 months ago and started my own consulting firm. I work from home, on my own terms. I'm more successful and happier than I've ever been. The change wasn't just external. The real change happened inside me. I no longer walk through the world carrying the weight of needing to prove myself. I am enough, just as I am. The fallout from that fateful Thanksgiving was significant. My father, true to his word, cut Melanie and Tom off completely. For them, the first few months were brutal. They had to downsize their apartment. Melanie, for the first time in her adult life, had to get a full-time job. Tom, faced with the reality of being the sole provider, found a stable job in logistics and has stuck with it. According to my Aunt Eleanor, it was the hardest and best thing that ever happened to them. They were forced to become a team, to rely on each other instead of on my parents' handouts. They're building a life that is truly their own. My parents, their journey has been quieter, and perhaps more difficult. They were faced with a sudden, deafening silence. Their social circle saw the pictures from France. The carefully crafted image of their perfect family was shattered. They were left with an empty nest and a lot of uncomfortable questions. They started going to therapy. Separately at first, then together. It's a slow process. About 3 months ago, I received a letter. A real, handwritten letter from Melanie. In it, she apologized again, not just for her passivity, but for her own role in perpetuating the family dynamic. She wrote about how my standing up for myself inspired her to find her own strength. It was honest and heartfelt, with no agenda and no requests. I called her after I read it. We talked for over 2 hours. Really talked, for the first time in probably 15 years. And we began to build something new. A real sisterhood, based on mutual respect. That's why this year my parents were invited to Thanksgiving. It wasn't an easy decision, but Melanie and I made it together. They arrived yesterday, looking smaller and more uncertain than I had ever seen them. As my father walked onto the terrace, he just looked around, speechless. My mother came over to me, her eyes filled with a complex mixture of regret and awe. She looked at me, not at the house, and said the words I had waited 33 years to hear. "This is extraordinary, Cassandra," she said, her voice quiet. "You've built something so beautiful here. I am so, so proud of you." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. I realized in that moment that I was finally receiving the validation I had craved for a lifetime, but I was receiving it now as a gift, not as something I desperately needed to survive. Looking back, I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't accommodation. It's true. Sometimes, the most powerful response to rejection isn't anger. It's creation. And sometimes, the family you need isn't the one you were born into, but the one you dare to build for yourself. This journey wasn't easy, but it was mine. And it led me home. Have you ever had to draw a difficult boundary with the people you love? How did you navigate those painful but necessary conversations? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me.